everybody. Welcome to The Scoop. I'm Farah.
And I'm Nicole.
And I'm
And sorry. Sorry, Sarah. Make lots of mistakes. So go ahead.
And this is
and I'm Sarah.
Yay! Welcome, Sarah. We're so excited to have you.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here.
So who are you? I'd love to know about you.
All right. I am a BCBA at the Pleasant Prairie campus of Sonnenberg Consultants. And the track that I work the most closely with is our early life skills tracks. So my clients are mostly like one just turned 8, 5 through 8 year olds. And we're working a lot on our communication skills, a little bit of those self-help skills, learning how to advocate for yourself. But you can find me in every room at Pleasant Prairie. I'm
Well, and you're after school too, right?
Yes, I also am in charge of the expansion room in after school.
Awesome. Well, welcome to The Scoop. And we were pretty just laid back and just have a good time. And we just want to use this tool for anyone for education and just learning. And Nicole and I always laugh because we're always like, we learn so much in this hour. We brainstorm, we think of things, so it's just really fun. So we're really excited to have you on. And well, let's get started, right? Okay. All right. So Sarah, I think my biggest interest in what you do is you've got what are you passionate about, and what is your training on, and what would you like to talk about as far as OBM and just like the things that you train and work with techs and RBTs, and so I'd love to just kind of get an overview of that, and then we can kind of just let it go with whatever is kind of natural as far as training and what you use and that kind of stuff.
Right. All right. What I'm passionate about, a whole lot, but
Yeah.
we can kind of zone in today a little bit on, I try really hard to continually teach my staff when I'm in the room. So a lot of that continuing education piece, I love teaching new things. I love explaining new things. And I want to try to make it fun at the same time. So a lot of what I do has to do with the basic behavioral principles. So every single human follows that ABC, 3-term contingency. Something happens, we respond, and there's some sort of consequence, right? So I take that into consideration with all of my interactions. It's like in the back of my mind as I go through my life. Honestly, it's so ingrained at this point. And as I'm trying to get staff to implement these things I'm teaching them, trying to help them be the best tech that they can, I make sure that those antecedents are really clear. They really have the opportunity to soak up the information and implement it. But I also want to make sure that they're coming into contact with reinforcement afterwards and that it's something that they want to continue doing. So I try to do it naturally, but also I have some super fun reinforcement systems that I put in for them as well.
Wonderful. That's awesome. Can you go a little bit into how that ties into, because you're very passionate about OBM, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So how does that tie into that? And can you explain that a little bit? We've done a little bit on here, here and there as far as describing it, but I would love for everybody to know how that is married with everything that we do, more specifically.
Yes. So OBM is yet another ABA acronym. We have so many.
Yes, we do.
And it stands for Organizational Behavior Management. So there are some BCBAs in the world who don't necessarily work with kids with autism. And what they do is they work for businesses and they try to improve the systems in place and make these businesses and organizations more effective, make sure the employees are getting things done. So you don't have to only do this in this formal setting. I kind of apply it naturally here at Sonnenberg by taking these behavioral principles and applying it to make my RBTs, my BTTs work more effectively and honestly just do a better job and also enjoy doing it.
Yeah, that's awesome. So that's what you do with your classroom, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So I would love to hear about, well, let me give a little bit of what we're trying to do and what Nicole's trying to do. and kind of, I know she talked to you about some of the things that you're doing. We went into leadership and we talked about it in the staffing. So it's very exciting. So this is just my perspective. What I did was I was like, okay, we're just going to have a fun, like, who's got the cleanest room? And I'm going to use the cleaners. They're going to tell me what's the cleanest room. I already kind of knew probably what was going to happen because I already had known about your room and stuff, but I kind of wanted to just see, right? It's kind of a sample for my own. And then it takes me out of it, and it's the cleaners just telling me at both places what is the cleanest and all of that stuff. So that's what we started. We started just reinforcing weekly of like, this is who had the cleanest room. She did a couple at a time sometimes if they were close. And then of course your room won. It can pretty much run independently for the most part, right? Would you say?
Mhm.
Yeah. And that's the goal, right? We want our staff to be able to stand and work together on their own, as a group. So that was kind of, I really wanted to kind of show that so we could say like, oh, this is so great. This is what you're doing. So can you explain your day to day as far as how it can run independently, what you started, what you do, what that looks like? And then I know that you can add some visuals so people can see what you're doing. But could you go over that a little bit on how that started and what you're and to maintain that too?
Yeah, so it started out, I came into a whole new track. I had to figure out how to organize it, how to get everything flowing in the way I wanted to as I learned about the staff and the clients. And the first thing I did was, I'm always going to bring it back to those ABCs, the antecedent behavior consequence. First, I really honed in on those antecedent strategies. So when you go in my classroom, there's just typed out details and directions literally everywhere. It's like covering my walls because I have super, super clear expectations. I go over them verbally with my staff. I go over them in overlaps. And if they forget, it's everywhere. So this is exactly when I want these centers to occur. This is exactly what the expectation is. This is what the client should be doing. This is what the staff should be doing. I have a binder full of it for after school too. So just continually being able to reference that, making sure they know the schedule, they know how to follow it. Individual clients all have their own set of this is exactly the expectations. It's in their session note and it's posted above their cubbies. So making sure that was all super clear. And then I started to think about reinforcing this behavior of what I wanted my staff to do. So the first thing I did was keeping that room clean. I am a neat freak. I want the room clean. I want it organized. It's safer that way. So I did it almost in a teaching way. I set up a long-term goal and short-term goals for my staff, just like we do for the clients in their learning trees. And the long-term goal was just having a safe, clean environment. I'm like, we can all agree that's something we should work for. And then I broke it up into 3 short-term goals that I wanted them to work towards. And the first one was, you're all assigned chores. I want those chores to be done by 3 o'clock every day. And then we can show the visual. I have this giant board in my room. It's got all my staff's names. It's got all these little boxes. So what I would do is, it's called momentary time sampling. I would go in at a specific time and I would see, oh, is this chore done? If it was, they'd get a check. If it wasn't, it would be blank. And I never wanted to use punishment. So it wasn't calling them out, oh, you didn't get a check mark today. That would be punishment, and that's not as powerful as reinforcement. But when they did get a check mark, I would offer some praise because I know that my room does well with praise. So, oh, great, you got a check mark today. Oh, you only need 3 left. And the goal was when they got all these check marks, they would get some sort of reinforcement. So I had a little reinforcement for each of the goals. And I figured this out by doing preference assessments. I talked to them about what they would be interested in. My room loves potlucks. I went over to Mount Pleasant. They don't like potlucks as much. Will's room was very anti-potluck. My room loves potlucks. So that was the first thing they worked for is, oh, can we all bring in stuff and have like a sub sandwich party? So we did that. We've done like an ice cream social. When they finish all of the 3 short-term goals, then I get them a whole pizza party. So, but I think what's interesting about my check marks is I did what's called an interdependent group contingency. So one person could be doing their chores perfectly, they get all their check marks. But if one of the other staff is not, the whole group can't get that reinforcement until everybody does it. So it creates a lot of that teamwork aspect where my room was always very polite. They weren't like nagging each other, but they're like, don't forget to do your chore. We still need your check mark. So
Right.
that I wouldn't be there telling them what to do, but instead it was that internal teamwork of them encouraging each other to get those check marks done. So then we've done that with cleaning, with staying within 3 feet of your clients, running programs during lunch, which is hard because everyone wants to eat and talk. And I'm like, oh, we're still in therapy.
Yeah.
So anything that I think the whole room as a group could really work on together, that's something that I target through my interdependent group contingency.
That's awesome. Some of the things I heard, I think you talk about recently when you were helping out with Will, I think at Mount Pleasant, was that there was more staff across rooms or something. So, right? Or they shared staff. So then is that a barrier? Are you able, you know what I mean? When somebody new comes in and they don't know what's going on, or they have to have, they're not there that often. How do you work that in?
Yeah, I think that was the biggest barrier because in my room, I have pretty consistent staff. We have fill-in, obviously, but
Right.
as opposed to Mount Pleasant, it's a lot more fluid, which room they'll be in at which time. So I had actually brainstormed a little bit with Andrea for how we could possibly adjust that. So another way you could do it is just for the chores example, like sweeping, and it would just check off if sweeping was done. That way you didn't have to worry about a specific human being in the room. They played around with having every single person on the list, but it was really frustrating if somebody like filled in for one day and they got one check mark, but then they didn't come back again for
Right.
weeks. So you could also break it down by just the specific chores, or maybe like John Doe's staff or something did this. And then it's
Okay.
just making sure that all keeping track of all the staff that participated so that they all do contact reinforcement.
Awesome. Yeah, that I had maybe I read that or something, but yeah, so you have different obviously things going on. Size, Pleasant Prairie is much bigger than Mount Pleasant, and the way that or if somebody's on vacation and then that's a week, they're gone for a week or whatever it may be. So that's cool to hear that. Was there any other barriers that you encountered that you want to talk about or that could happen?
Yeah, I think another thing I do with like a vacation or something made me think of it. They don't all have to reach the same number of check marks.
Okay.
So I'd have a regular staff, I would want them to get 5 check marks. But maybe I had somebody out because she sprained her ankle, so we weren't going to wait on her. Or somebody's only in my room 2 days as opposed to 5 days a week. So I could also adjust the number of check marks they need to complete, their portion of this group contingency.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, that's very cool. Nicole, do you have anything? Because I know that you worked with Sarah to talk about some of this stuff as far as how we can teach this, right? Across the tracks or the campuses. Is there anything like what's your goal for everybody so we can kind of replicate this?
Yeah, I mean, I would like everybody to look at like motivation and like what is going to actually act as a reinforcement, because I think that it would be easy to go and say, okay, here's the goals, we're all going to work towards this, but what if they're not motivated by that? So what I really liked that you did was take this preference assessment and see like what really motivated them and what they wanted. And we saw that that was different across locations. And I think that it would be different across like rooms or different sets of people as well. And what that looks like, because there's also some financial means to that too, right? Where it's like, okay, well, the pizza party, a potluck is a little bit different, but then also having like, I really liked that you had like the levels in place too. Like this goal had a potluck, this goal had a pizza party, because maybe that goal was a little bit more challenging to achieve or took longer or took more effort. So I would really want people to get that part of it, like the motivation and the value of reinforcement, like how the reinforcement is effective. What did you
So,
see at the other campus?
oh yeah.
As far as what they found reinforcing.
Yeah.
Well, I'd gone around and tried to do a casual preference assessment, but I think a lot of it, I didn't have rapport. I went in my first day, I'm asking them things like,
Oh,
oh, well, we like everything,
Okay.
oh, food, we love food. But then once I talked to Will and Charmaine about it a little bit, they're like, oh, well, they're not really excited about this potluck. I'm like, oh, well, Will, how
so
about you go in and
interesting.
ask them?
Yeah.
You've got more rapport than I do. So Will went in and did the preference assessment actually. And that's when they were like, yeah, potlucks have germs. And I'm like, oh, okay. They're like, what about a pairing day? I had never even heard of a pairing day actually. And they were explaining it to me and they're like, Will, can we work for this? So it was really interesting to see me doing the preference assessment as opposed to somebody that they work with every day. We got really different results.
Well, I would love to talk about that. It's just, yeah, like, can you talk a little bit about, I mean, that's a big part of, is your relationships, right? Your rapport and yeah. Can we talk a little bit about that and what you've done to build that? I mean, we, of course, do nonviolent communication, and that connection is obviously huge. So it's kind of all ties in. But what do you do specifically? I know I've heard you talk about that. Could you go a little bit into that? Because here we
Yeah.
go. Look at the differences.
Yeah, I think building rapport is like the main antecedent strategy that we need to do because you can't give feedback to a staff if you have absolutely no relationship. They don't know you, they don't like you, they're not going to be as receptive to what you're saying. So, especially when I first went into this room, it was just slowly getting to know them as people before I went in with the feedback. So, what I try to do is, I think the first thing is just view them as people and have those like kind of small talk conversations. It only takes a few seconds instead of just jumping in and being like, we're going to do with this client today. Hey, how are you doing? Oh, it was your kid's birthday. What did you do this weekend? And having a little bit of that personal connection with them. I think that goes a long way because then when I do give feedback, they want to, with children, we're pairing. They've learned when I give a demand and they complete the demand, they get reinforcement. And the same thing happens with me. If I give feedback and they follow through with the feedback, I give them praise. And because they have that rapport with me, I think it's more valuable than a totally novel person giving them that praise. And then I've really spent a lot of time talking to my staff and having them give me feedback ultimately on what they find effective in an overlap. So some of the things, I even surveyed a couple other rooms. I surveyed some people in Mount Pleasant and said, okay, when somebody comes in for an overlap and then they leave, what about that overlap made you feel like there was a connection? Like, wow, that was a really good overlap because that's how we mainly build rapport. One was, well, I love when they actually jump in the session and they're playing with the kids and they're not behind the computer the whole time. And that's something I like to do. If you come in my room, I'm like on the floor underneath a parachute half the time. Like I'm always in there playing with the kids and having that relationship. And then I think that shows my staff, oh wow, she actually knows these kids. She likes these kids. She understands how to play with them. So that gives me a little more credibility. I also really value the BTT and RBT's opinions. I remember not feeling heard when I first started in the ABA field in another company. It was like, oh, I'm the BCBA, I know best kind of mentality. Yeah. But I remember thinking, well, I work with this kid day in and day out. I have a lot of valuable information. I might not know the science words behind it, right, but I know this kid. So I do a lot of asking them questions. Hey, do you have anything that you want to talk about? Answer their questions, but also they're comfortable coming to me with brainstorms. So, hey, Sarah, have you thought about putting a weight program in? And I'll either say, ooh, that's a great idea, or, oh, I do think that's a good idea, but they need to learn how to do blank, blank, and blank first. So taking those brainstorms into account, asking their opinion on, hey, I think this might be a barrier for this program. Is this what you're seeing? Do you think there's another reason why they're not meeting this? And they're able to give me their thoughts. And then I'm also able to use that as a learning opportunity because I found a lot of my staff want to know more about ABA.
Right.
So as they're explaining this, I'm giving my feedback. Oh, well, I want to try this prompting strategy, and this is why. I'm always telling them the reason why I'm doing things. And I think that makes them feel more valuable. Like, oh, she thinks that I'm capable of understanding this. She wants to know if I think this will work.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's a huge part also of how I've built that rapport.
Well, it's buy-in too. You want them to be able to buy into what you're doing and understanding, and like you said, the why behind it. So why are we even doing this? If you don't know why, then it's kind of hard to keep moving forward, right? And I love that. Nicole, do you have anything to add to that? What has been your experience with that kind of, because you're great at rapport building with
Yeah,
that.
now you do a lot of rapport building like in the moment, right? So
Yes.
there's like the small talk, it's like through supervision, it's getting their feedback and things like that. What would your advice be to people? Because sometimes I hear that the barrier is like, well, I can't get all of my work done, like my notes and my learning tree is, and build this rapport. And you do that very naturally. So like, do you have any advice on how other people can do that?
I think what I do, I hyper schedule everything in my head,
Okay.
honestly.
Yeah.
It might look like it's a flow, but when I'm in my overlap, I kind of know in my head, okay, I'm going to spend the first 5 minutes talking about, doing an introduction. Oh, do you have any questions? Then I'm going to take 5-10 minutes, look at the data. Okay, which things do I really need to look at today? Okay, next, I'm going to jump back in. I'm going to be a part of the session. Now I'm going to probe things out. So I actually have my overlap like hyper scheduled in my head, but I've done it enough times that it naturally flows. But it's almost a reminder to myself. Like when I first started overlapping, I always forgot to update my note as I went. And I had to remind myself, go to your computer, update your note. It's the same thing with building rapport. Oh, okay, you need to jump back in. You need to talk to this BTT right now. So I'll jump in, I'll talk to them, or I'm going to jump in, I'm going to play with the kid. Or just naturally, I see like, ooh, it looks like they need help. Obviously, I'm going to stop what I'm doing and I'm going to jump in as they need me.
I think you do a really nice job of like balancing that and like having that rapport, doing everything that it is that you need to do. And like you're creating independence with the staff because you could not be in there and things still like kind of run systematically. I think rapport is huge. So what if there's individuals that have a hard time with small talk?
I think it's really personalizing what it is because most of my staff do like small talk, but I can figure out pretty quickly if that's not what they're looking for. I do have a few little bit more private staff, so I figure out what's reinforcing to them. I do have a staff where, I'll ask about her kid once in a while, but it's not necessarily something she talks about a whole lot, but I know she really likes those learning opportunities. So instead of spending a lot of time talking about what's happening at home, it's like, all right, what have you noticed about this kid? And it's their opportunity to talk about work, talk about what they've seen with the client. And that's kind of how I've built a little bit more rapport there. So it's kind of seeing how they respond to me, if they want to keep going, or if they naturally start sliding the conversation in another direction. I know that that's more of what they need out of me.
Yeah. Would you say that's kind of like a prerequisite to like being a leader is to identify when to pivot in those conversations and like pair with the staff as well as like body language, like identifying like, oh, this is making them uncomfortable or, oh, like I'm going to go this way.
I think so. And it's something that's really hard because that doesn't come naturally to most people. But I almost look at it like we have to look at our clients and see when our clients no longer giving us assent, right? They're starting to like move away from us. They could show us with their body language, hey, I'm not into this anymore. You don't have my assent to continue with this program. I almost look at it like I'm an adult. You could tell by hyper focusing on those little things, just like we do with their client, their comfortability level and kind of going from there.
Yeah. I love that because it's the same as like we would do for our clients that we would do for anyone really, because it comes back to like the 3-term contingency or 4-term if you're getting super technical.
Yeah, I think that's the easiest way for me to explain it to people that don't naturally have all those soft skills or still learning them is honestly, obviously they're not your clients, but the same behavioral principles apply. So everything that you do to be a good clinician, it's the same with your staff, paying attention to those subtle things, thinking of everything through that contingency and making sure that they get reinforcement just like the kids get reinforcement.
I love that.
For sure. I like all of that a lot. One of our first videos or podcasts was if you don't have a relationship and then you don't have anything. And that really, I truly believe that that's one of our, actually, when we're going into mentorship, that's one of the things that we ask because it's so important that you have relationships with everybody that you're interacting with in some way. And everybody is different, right? We have staff that don't like attention at all, so if you're giving them all this attention, it actually is very negative, right? And they avoid then, so then you're like, where is this person? Well, they're avoiding you. Or, I have kids in the past that would go like this, when I'd walk in the room because I'm so loud. So I have to remember not to be so loud, so it's just really interesting because I do think it's so important. Have you noticed, Sarah, too, that sometimes you have to leave an open-ended question so you get more out of people so they can't say yes or no or good or whatever? Because that's one thing that in mentorship we really work and have talked a lot about is how to get people that are so quiet and they're intimidated or they're like, I don't want to get the answer wrong. That's kind of how, if I say something wrong, even though there's not really a wrong answer when you're just trying to create a relationship and a rapport. What would you say about that?
Yeah, I didn't really think about how much I do that until you mentioned it actually. But with staff that I've worked with a long time, I can just ask, do you have questions? And yeah, they do. But newer staff might not be as comfortable sharing those. So I guess I do word it a little bit differently, like, which programs would you like me to model for you? Kind of like that. Not a no, I don't need anything, but which ones are a little more confusing? Which would you like more of an explanation on? Is kind of the approach that I would take there, as opposed to just that yes, no.
Yeah, because when we have new mentors or new mentees coming in, and if you have both the same time, because we have quite a few that are in training, that's one of their biggest questions is like, what do I do when, and so then well, in the past I have said, okay, let me just sit down. Let's just hang out, and one of the things that I do see are, how is everything? Well, they can just say, fine, good, okay, so versus tell me a couple of things that have gone really well. And then they're like, oh, and sometimes I'll even say, let me start. Let me tell you some of the things that I've loved about my week or today, or some of the things I've struggled. That's another really, I think, thing that has really helped is that everybody struggles. There's days, I've told people, can I even be in this field? Am I even good enough to be in this field? Because we all have those days where we're like, man, it's just not going well. Like today, I'm just not getting in the groove or whatever, And so I think that's been helpful for people too, to be like, oh, you struggle too? And I'm like, yeah, I'm really having a hard time talking today, or I'm really having a hard time, whatever. And then it kind of opens the door too. Do you have any little tricks like that have helped when you have people that it's just, they're a little bit more shy or just to open up because they're nervous or what have you?
Yeah, I do really like that vulnerability. I think that's something, I have to go and be confident, like I know how to write these kids' programs. I don't want them second guessing that. But if I'm not super chipper, I'll admit like, oh, I'm really tired or I'm really struggling with this program or something like that, just so they know like, oh, sometimes she has trouble figuring things out too.
I like vulnerability. That's a good word to use. Yeah.
But I think when, again, going back to how we work with the clients, when they're really struggling to express themselves, we give kids a forced choice, this or this. So it's almost the same thing. Like, okay, I know these two programs some people have had trouble with. Do you want me to model this one or this one? or kind of base it like, oh, it looks like they haven't run this program when I'm looking at their data, and kind of giving them a choice that way to open up the door of, okay, I have to pick one. Which one am I going to do? And
Yeah, I
then
love that.
like, okay, I think this one. Oh yeah, I'm not sure. I haven't run this one lately. Have you had any barriers? And then opening it up that way.
Yeah, that's really good. That's another, yeah. Nicole, what have you had that, that has been kind of a little trick or a little teaser help to open up
I
staff?
mean, I like the vulnerability pieces. I also give like my intention. So sometimes my intention is to go through programs. Sometimes my intention is to like maybe I am having a hard day. Like, can we play with the client? Like, can we do something together?
Love
Or
that.
sometimes I'll go in without my computer during lunchtime or whatever and say, okay, my intention is just to like get to know you guys better. I don't know you guys that well. And so, and I just state that, but I feel comfortable saying that. I'm not sure everybody does. But I think that that's been the biggest thing for me is like people want to know, especially me, because I'm like, people want to know why I'm in the room, you know? So when I walk into a room, I almost feel like I have to say, like, this is why I'm here. Or like I walked in a room the other day and I said, hey, I'm just here to help you guys like clean up a little bit. And, like just simple things like that.
That's that's so good because yeah, I always think of when you're in a doctor's office and you're getting an exam or something and they walk you through, where are you the most comfortable? When they tell you what's going to happen and why it's happening versus you going in your head like, what are they doing? Why do they have to do that? So like I think that's what you're saying, Nicole, too, is like sometimes you think, I mean, we tell a lot of stories, in our head. So somebody walks in, you're like, they're here for me. I did something wrong. They're observing me because I'm going to be in trouble, or whatever it may be. So I think intent and the reason you're there, the why, again, the why, is so helpful, even though it seems like it's not a big deal. I'm just here because, whatever, right? I mean, I'm in and out of rooms all the time. And so that's a good point, is I really try to say, like, I'm not even here for anybody. I'm here because of the environment. I got to look at this or I got to do this, and they're like, oh, okay. So I love that. That's awesome. Choices, vulnerability, intent, purpose. And then anything else that you guys can think of that are little tricks like that for that rapport building and
One
connecting?
thing I thought of with intention a lot is staff get really stressed out when I'm overlapping, but then I'm still learning new things. So I might have Brittany overlapping me or Haley a whole party with this client. And I know that makes staff nervous. So I try to give them the heads up, both when I'll be overlapping and when, oh, hey, I'm going to have Brittany with me today.
Oh,
And
okay.
I'll state her intention as well as mine. So,
Like that.
back when I was still accruing my BCBA hours, it'd be, oh, she's supervising me towards my BCBA hours. So really she's going to focus a little bit more on giving me feedback, but she might step in if she sees, some advice that she could give you. Or even now, like, oh, I'm having Haley come in because I really want to look at this one program, and just letting them know, like, it's not like they're in trouble and we have a whole bunch of people watching you.
I
But
love
hey,
that.
I'm learning and growing. My intention is to bring somebody else in so we can all learn and grow and problem solve together. And that makes them feel a lot less anxious, and just giving them that heads up ahead of time. Brittany comes in every week and I'm like, you get me and Brittany this week. This is why. So they know, like,
Oh,
okay, I'm ready for it. I know this isn't a stressful situation.
I really like that. That should be kind of a standard thing for sure. Because I mean, it's just something that in our head, we're like, this is not a big deal. This is what we're doing. But nobody else knows that but you and the person. Really, right? So I like that. That should be just kind of a standard thing, It's like again, I think of it as, a behavior and medical, like doctors, it's the same thing. It's like your bedside manner. It's like when doctors go in and they're doing all of the things, it's the same thing. We're in a classroom and they're explaining your intent and what you're about to do. So I like that. Is there anything else, Nicole? Do you have anything else like that?
I don't think so. I think we went over a lot.
Yeah, that's all really helpful. I'm going to be rewatching this and writing some of this down because I think that it should be just a standard practice of these are the things that I mean, we do intent, purpose, and commitment because that's also really important too, is like what's your commitment when you're going over everything that you're doing, and you're teaching, you're learning, and then how are we following up? So that model try feedback too, right? Because you were saying that like they love it when you jump in and model it, right? And so following up with that too, that's kind of the commitment of like what is their commitment and my commitment to that relationship and to that learning process for the client. So I think those are all really important things too. Okay, so what else did we want to talk about, Sarah? What other things do you think are important to know about your classroom or just in general that you think would be helpful?
Well, I do another type of reinforcement that I haven't touched on
Oh,
yet. So we could cover that in case it's helpful to somebody.
let's do it.
So for me, there's always certain programs with certain clients, and staff just are not running this program for whatever reason. I've talked to them about it. It's really just they forget most of the time. It doesn't naturally fit into the DTT table or anything like that. So on top of each client's table, I have earn bucks with John Doe, and I list those 3 programs, and then they can do tallies. Ooh, I ran that program today. I'm going to give myself a tally or 2 tallies. Those tallies then go into Sonnenberg bucks that I'll give them. So I
Oh,
think the group contingency is great, but I also want them, some people don't like group projects, right? They
right.
don't want to wait for the other person to get it right. So here they can contact that immediate reinforcement for something that's only within their control. And that's how they get their Sonnenberg bucks. And it keeps me accountable too, because I'll be honest, I'm doing so many things. I forget to put out Sonnenberg bucks when I should. So it's my way. It's just a permanent product. I come in the morning, I tally up everybody's bucks, boop, 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 and then I move on with my day.
Oh, that's interesting. So it's you use it as programs, I'll call them programs or things that aren't always fitting into and that they forget a lot of. And that's what you're reinforcing with the Sonnenberg box, right? So if you have Joey and can you give an example of like, let's say there's Joey and the attack is Susie, what would be something that you would do with Joey?
So I might do like a manning. You need to have at least 50 mans, and then they'll check
Got
that.
it.
Or I like them to use clickers, but they think they're like, oh no, I can remember it. No, you're probably
Ah,
not going to be accurate. So use a clicker could be one, or just certain group programs like make sure to practice like Connect Four or something, like specific games that only get run like once every 2 weeks. Like you could contrive a time to play Connect Four. It takes 3 minutes. So,
got it.
that specific play goal or something like that.
But
Just
it's a specific thing for that client.
yes. So it's specific. Each client, it's right above their cubby. Earn bucks with so and so and specifically pulled from their session note.
I really like that. That's really cool. I like that a lot because then it's specific. And so okay, so back to you then as a supervisor, um, you specifically tell yourself, I'm going to go around and see and to each table, each client, like that's kind of like I'm going to take this amount of time right now to do that. And so do you go around and do that, or how do you organize yourself for other leaderships? Like what's the advice?
Yeah, that's kind of when I come in the morning, I get myself set up and I go table to table with my dry erase marker. I'll add up the number of Sonnenberg bucks that they got, put that in. And then I also have another sheet. I've got papers everywhere. I just have a blank laminated sheet above each of their cubbies as well, where I want staff to write any questions or any brainstorms that they have. And that kind of limits the interruptions when I'm overlapping somebody else. The staff are always like, oh, Sarah, how do you want me to mark this data? So to decrease the interruptions when I'm doing other things, I'll be like, oh, write it down on the sheet and I'll go over at our next overlap.
Oh, I love that.
So little non-urgent things, they'll put a little question. If they need stimuli, they'll write it down. If they're like, hey, Sarah, I was thinking of this. I'm like, ooh, that's a great brainstorm. Write it down. So then when I'm going through the morning, short little questions that can have a written answer, I'll write out the written answer. Otherwise, they'll just be, I'll leave it up as a mental tally for my next overlap to make sure I go over it.
I love that. That's great. But which makes sense why your room runs so independently, because you have something for all of that. It doesn't silence them, just redirects them, and you reinforce, what you want them to do, obviously, for like a system. So when you're in your overlap, you already have that. Then it actually is exciting to have you overlap because they have all these questions that they wrote down, and now they're looking forward to you coming to overlap because they'll get their questions answered versus being interrupted, right?
Yes, that's really how I try to gear it. And some of them are like, oh, yes, I'm glad you're overlapping because I wanted to go over this, this, and this with you. So that's the main goal for me, is to try to make my overlap something reinforcing. Because I've been at the ABA clinic where I remember CMOR for my BCBA exam. It's something that signifies worsening conditions. I remember
Okay.
that for my exam because it was my old BCBA's car. I would see her where I was going to be. I knew I would get overlapped. I knew it would be stressful. And I was like, no,
Oh.
that's not going to be me. So I've really, really worked to try to make my overlaps as reinforcing as possible for them.
That's so interesting because we've all had people that we really gravitate towards, that we really like how they supervise, and we've had others that we, are less desirable to us. So I always try to think of that too. Like what you just said about the car, and you didn't want to be like that. And so one of the things I never desired from my beginning years was to try to avoid, we have people call in when certain people overlap, potentially that has happened, or a certain client, right? That all of a sudden we see them client in, call in because there's a client on their schedule. So those are the things we obviously want to avoid, and we want to just talk about and figure out and work through so it's positive, because you don't want to have all this avoidance, right? So I always do think about what I didn't like in the past. And I really think that's why when you just said, I don't want to be that BCBA, I'm like, I don't want to be that person. So I think that's also valuable, is to think about your past experiences and what you really liked. What was really positive about whatever person it was, and why was that positive? And so predictability is a big one, and transparency. We hear that, Nicole and I've heard that a lot over the years. Of even, let's talk about clients and switching clients. They're like, we're like, we put it on your schedule. They're like, you did, but it was like an hour before, 15 minutes before, and we realize sometimes that happens. I mean, Nicole could probably talk to the end of the day right now on that, but we realize too, like they have to process it, and they really like predictability and like the night before, so they know what they're doing, so they prepare themselves as much as possible. Nicole, have you heard that lately? Same kind
Yeah.
of, yeah.
Mhm.
So I think we just really try to learn those needs and what actually makes somebody, again, it's reinforcement, right? What is reinforcement, and what is something that, people avoid because that happens. So that's also interesting. You guys have anything else to add with that? It goes really fast. We're already at 9:50. I know, it's crazy. It just flows. Yeah. Is there anything else, Sarah, that you want to talk about? That was awesome
Thank
to
you.
hear about that.
I don't think I have anything off the top of my head. I think I went over the most important things that I wanted to impart about what makes my room run smoothly.
Yeah, no, I think it's amazing, and it's great, and it's systems. That's what you're doing. You're putting systems in your room to of all the different things, because one of the main things we hear about too is I'm interrupted, and I can't stay and get my stuff done. Oh, I did have a question. I didn't want to interrupt you before. So you had said in the beginning or midway through that you have like your checklist in your head, like I do this, I do this, but I just do it so much now that it looks flawless and it looks smooth. Would you say then that you do need to make a checklist and kind of stick to that checklist, like a physical visual, and that you go through that to get into a system? Is that what you did as far as like, is that what you mean by checklist?
Yes, like Haley actually helped write it with me
Oh,
because
okay.
I was struggling, like, oh, geez, I can't get everything done. I have like stuff at the end of my overlap I didn't even get to. So she kind of gave me her advice for what she goes over. She physically wrote it down for me. I kind of tweaked it to fit my needs in my room. But yes, I did carry a physical checklist for about 2 weeks until I got it through
Oh, I
just
love
being
that.
like, "Oop, did I do this? Did I do this?" So
So does everybody have that, Nicole?
There is a supervision checklist. Yeah. I think it would be beneficial to tweak it to like how you're going to remember it, and how you're going to do it so it flows for you. But I think like the biggest thing is like also boundaries, right? Because like
Sure.
you have this checklist, but if you start to steer away from that checklist, whatever checklist you created for yourself, then you're no longer following it. So it's like you stayed with it for 2 weeks until it became like habit for you. And then you were able to like keep going.
Well, and we've talked about this, maybe not so, as much on camera, some on camera, but in the podcast, but it restores integrity too. Because if you don't keep with like this is what I want to accomplish. So if whether that's a checklist, okay, so this works for Sarah, I'm going to tweak this and I'm going to flip this, or I'm going to do this because this is what works for me. But like Nicole, you're saying is like it doesn't really matter if you're not sticking to it, right? So that I think is really important. So maybe having something standard, but then being able to tweak it, but then are you sticking with it? So I think that's really important, which is why I brought at the beginning. I don't know if this will be on the podcast because we might have talked about it before it turned on, but is those boundaries. And that is one of our beginning videos of like restoring integrity through boundaries and how that looks, because everybody wins when you're keeping your boundaries because you're able to get through what you're able to get through. So I think of Sarah, how you're like, I'm always getting interrupted, nobody gets a true overlap because I'm over here, I'm doing this, right. And so you can actually commit, and your overlap means you're with Susie or Joey or whoever it may be, right? And your attention is with them. And that means a lot because they know that you're going to give the same attention to them that you had with the person when they wanted to interrupt. You know what I mean? And they can write it down. So I think that's important. That's really important. So I would recommend, yeah, our boundaries video too. If you watch this, go back to the boundaries, and I think between the two of them, it's going to be golden. I think I have to go back and watch again. But anyway, well, thank you, Sarah. Nicole, do you have anything else to add, or we just got a few minutes left?
No, thank you for coming.
yeah,
Yeah,
thank
thank
you so much.
you. I can't wait to go back through here and write stuff down. I'm excited about that. Well, thank you for coming, and everybody, thanks for joining us again, and we'll see you next time on The Scoop. Bye.